Okay.
2, 3, 2, 1. Recording, and now we're recording. So, Mr. Morley, author of The Ghost, the story of James Jesus Angleton, as well as Our Man in Mexico, about when Scott. He's already been on here for all of you listeners. He's already been on here. Hold on, I'm trying to collapse this side screen. He's already been on here, and he's why am I having him on again? Why, what's on my, what he just asked was what's on my mind. We've already talked about the book. Why, what kind of idiot double dips and comes back for the same discussion? I told you last time afterwards, I think I told you off camera, that no bullshit, it was top 10 favorite books. I have on a lot of authors. I didn't want to insult anybody. But now I'm telling you on camera that listening to it again, it truly is in my top 10 favorite books. And I say that, I mean that. It's the whole story of him to me is so fascinating. And
Mhm.
going back through it, it's like when you revisit a movie, when you revisit a book, even though now it's only been several months, when you revisit it, you just start to see different angles.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot there.
yeah, and I'm gonna hurry up and stop talking because no one's listening to this for me. They're listening to this for you. Reviewing it again and again, it seems to be this perfect storm of a hyper intelligent, super competent, well positioned guy who truly believes that he's fighting communism, the scourge of the world, is a, more than his peers, a pro Israel proponent.
Mhm.
And really, that there's nothing in the way it's also framed. It may sound odd, but the fact that whereas other people in his day and age had a big problem with homosexuals, untraditional,
Right.
he truly didn't care. It's kind of like that Marine Corps general, I don't care if you're black or white, I hate you all equally. It's That's what he sounds like, is I don't care if you're gay or you're straight. To him, it's all about the bottom line. What can he get done? And I'm rambling now, so
Yeah, well, I mean, you bring up, that is one very interesting thing about Jim Angleton. Was he was a very cultured, cosmopolitan man, and this period when he's rising to power, when the CIA has just been created in 1947, the war is over, and this world is coming into being. So there's a lot of fear of communism. The CIA is created to fight communism, and there's Red Scare in Washington. What people don't realize, or it's not often mentioned, but there was also what they call the Lavender Scare too, which was a, a campaign against homosexuals or alleged homosexuals, to deprive them of their jobs. And in fact, a lot more people lost their jobs because they were supposedly gay than because they were communists. Probably 4 or 5 times as many people in Washington lost their jobs in the 50s on that allegation. So it
wow.
was a big thing that was happening. And when it happened at the CIA, with this one very prominent man, Karmalafi, who was openly gay, but also highly, highly competent. And so people wanted to work with him. And Angleton kind of protected him in the middle of all of that, from the people who were trying to get him out of a job. And they got him out of the spotlight. So that was one side of Angleton.
Yeah, it's like, and again, he goes to him and he's like, I would like to get you to what was called homo circles. He was like, I would like to get you to infiltrate them. And he's like, why would you offer this to me? You hate me. And he's like, exactly. Like Angleton, I mean, love it or hate it. I mean, he truly, these were all pawns before him and he didn't care. He did not, it was just, but I think that's what made him so lethal.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Going,
he was a true puppet master. I mean, and thought of the intelligence game as being like a puppet master. So, um, and he was adept. He was adept at it.
yeah,
And like you say, uh, uh, morality was a matter of indifference to him. It was completely utilitarian. It was like,
yes.
what do we need to do to accomplish what we want to accomplish?
Yes. And
So,
I thought it was fascinating about, again, you can pick up, you can pick up things that maybe you miss on for me on the fourth and the fifth listen through the book. Is also, side note for everybody listening, the more you listen to a book, you can actually start to speed it up because you know what they're talking about, so you can crank through it quickly. Is his working with, what was it, although he Angleton identified as Catholic and accepted Jesus Christ as his savior, he also learned what it was like the church of reality or the church of real politic. I forget how you worded it, but he stopped seeing different systems as moral or amoral, as ethical or unethical, and instead saw them as vessels and means to an end. And he started to view fascism, communism, democracy, Catholicism, even homosexual. He started to view all these things as ladders and not necessarily as good, bad. He's just sharper tool, sharp, blunter object.
Right. Yeah. That was the way he saw power.
Yeah.
And he was quite adept at wielding it, in a bureaucracy. He was a master of secrets and using secrets as leverage for things that he wanted to obtain. That was another part of his, kind of modus operandi.
Hmm. Now, with is it Mary Myers, uh,
Yeah.
JFK, one of his mistresses, who allegedly was, man. I mean, you couldn't write this. I mean, you clearly did. I mean, fictionally, you couldn't write this. She friends with Timothy Leary, and they're doing LSD. Perhaps
Yeah.
she did it with her VIP friend John F.
Right.
Kennedy.
Yeah.
They can't control him anymore. He's changing too fast. Assassinated. I mean, the cast of characters. I mean, it sounds like a money grab in Hollywood. Just
Yeah.
Hunter S. Thompson. I fear what I will wake up to, and it's just like, what the hell? But I'm trying to think. Leave my journal or my diary to Jim Angleton versus everyone else saying that, we didn't all go there. We came there in the morning and he was standing in there. When we asked him how we got in, the spy, the lockpick, he
Yeah.
shuffled his feet. What was there anything going on deeper, or was it just like how he showed up to? I'm going blank. Was it Win Scott who had the heart attack?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first of all, uh, Angleton was personal friends with Mary Myers. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
they were good friends, and she had told Anne Truitt, the friend, part of this same social circle. She had told Anne Truitt, if anything happens to me, give the diary to Jim. So, you know, Ben Bradley made a very apt observation about Angleton was people trusted him so much that they felt their secrets were more sacred with him and
Yeah.
with themselves, which if you think about it is crazy, but
Yeah.
that was part of his charisma. And so he was going to get the diary, and he got it, but it wasn't like he was stealing it. I mean, it was just like he wanted to put his hands on it first. He was supposed to get it, and I don't think that Ben Bradley knew that
Okay.
when he wrote that account. And so I mean, in a way, Angleton comes off slightly worse in that whole thing than I actually think that he deserved, because
Okay.
she did say that she wanted him to have it. So
Mhm.
that might be sinister of itself, but it is what Mary Meyer wanted,
Yeah.
So that story is fascinating for many reasons, but that's one of them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It might, it's like, don't attribute to malice what might be incompetent. Or in this case, it might just be Occam's razor. It might just be, yes, it is Spy Master Superman Angleton, but the reality is like, he also just had a friend who was like, hey, if something happens to me, you can have my, right? It'd be like if I died, it'd be like, well, he was just a guy. It's, I guess the analogy that maybe I incorrectly draw, the mind sometimes likes to draw lines between things that aren't related. It was, if I'm recalling correctly, it was Win Scott from your other book for everybody listening, Our Man in Mexico, also awesome. Yeah, I'm just correct. Win Scott had the heart attack. He's the one that died, and Angleton went and visited his wife afterwards, correct?
Yeah. So just to back up, this is from my other book, Our Man in Mexico, biography of Win Scott, the CIA's chief of station in Mexico throughout the 1960s. And when he died, he had written a memoir. He was writing a memoir after he retired from the CIA, and he finished it, and he was going to publish it. And the CIA was not happy about that, by the way. And so when he died, um, his friend, Jim Angleton, flew to Mexico City and basically, extracted that manuscript from his widow. And it was not a very pleasant experience for her. I mean, first of all, she was trying to cope with the fact that her husband and father of their 5 children had died. Second of all, she knew Jim Angleton and she did not like him
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then he shows up the day after her husband dies and he wants everything that she's got. And he takes it all and it's all suppressed. So that was a pure power play on Angleton's part because what Win Scott knew was very dangerous to Jim Angleton. So that's why he got it and he got it suppressed.
Mm-hmm. Again, it's that raw power where, yeah, she's grieving and he comes in and it's kind of like, hey, I understand you're grieving. I need this national It's kind of was it John von Neumann, the inventor of ENIAC and Maniac, when he was dying, his brain was starting to go, and they actually stationed guards because they didn't want people going in and getting information from this guy who maybe wasn't lucid, who helped build the hydrogen bomb. They didn't want people coming in there and being like, "Hey, old man, how do we get the uranium pusher plate to work?" But there is that national security kind of has that thing where they don't care if you're grieving. It's, I'm very sorry for your loss. We need this.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
So what I saw, and perhaps this is what's incorrect in my mind at least, was Angleton's willing to do that. He's willing to go in there and say, "Hey, I need this manuscript. And by the way, if I don't get it, I'm not going to say it, but you might not get your benefits from your husband dying. If I do get the manuscript, you'll be good, but otherwise, is there a parallel between that and the diary from Mary Myers where is she talking about JFK to him? Am I making it sexier than it is, or was it truly these aren't parallels? One was a random event and one was national security. Because I see that parallel, death and
Oh no, no,
retrieving
no. I
documents.
mean, the two situations are very similar in that you have authentic, original source material, right, from people in the know, and you want to control what they know. You don't want what they know to be shared. And
Yeah.
so that's what Angleton did in both cases. Now, were there national security concerns? Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I guess it would be embarrassing to the president if, the fact that they were having a relationship, you know, would that have endangered the security of the United States? They probably would have said yes. They might have used a national security argument there.
Okay.
Win Scott didn't blow any secrets in his memoir, at least the part that we've seen, but he did kind of shoot a big hole in the Warren Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were worried about that because Win Scott pointed out in the manuscript that the CIA, the Warren Commission had said something that was very incorrect factually about Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico City. And Win Scott pointed it out, and no one knew better than him because he was the king of the world down there. He was the chief of station, a very powerful man in that country at that time. So they had to suppress that. And so that's why they got that memo. And they probably would have said, well, if you blow a hole in the Warren Commission, that's bad for U.S. national security. Mm-hmm. So we're going to suppress it. So,
okay.
That's the all-purpose argument there.
Okay. And I always think, there's two ways to view things. Is there this sort of all-powerful puppet master and everything is part of something, or is it just a guy in his own words, don't worry, we're the masters of the universe, or we're the masters of the world? Is this a guy that is just doing what he sees fit? I mean, we see Angleton's too smart. He doesn't put it on paper. He does it through other people. But he was helping maybe the Vatican hide war criminals. He was helping the guy, the former SS guy in the movie theater. Please call Angleton. We see again and again that he does, or the guy picked up from the airport with the CIA guy who was a known criminal, and they're at dinner and they call Angleton, and Angleton calls at dinner. I mean, the stuff out of a Scorsese movie. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, a guy like Angleton was, he had a license to break the law. I mean, the charter of the CIA says go break the law of other countries. And so, it breeds this attitude of impunity. And when you're extremely smart, you're well-funded, and you can do anything in the world that you want. I mean, that kind of power goes to your head. I mean, I think your question is interesting. Is this part of some, bigger, monstrous
Yeah.
thing. Well, I mean, the CIA is pretty, lethal organization. It's done a lot of bad things, So, depending on how you want to, whatever your political point of view is about the CIA, but I don't think that's indisputable. Um, so, what's interesting about Angleton is he rode very high for a while, but his thinking was too rigid, and the world went past him. And when the world went past him, you know, he lost all of his power, and he looked like a bit of a fool, And so, for a brilliant guy, his rigid thinking really got him into trouble, and it meant that his power was not perpetuated. I
Mm.
thought, in the course of doing this book, I thought James Angleton, very famous guy, you know, highly regarded and all that. That's not the case at the CIA. In talking to former CIA officers and the historians in the agency, but people who are of that culture, and they think of Angleton as a guy who went off the rails, who caused a lot of problems for their profession, who didn't do things the right way. Kind of CIA people can be very correct. We got to do things the right way. So it wasn't his amorality that got him so much as that ultimately he was ineffective and he was out of touch with the world. And the stuff he said about the communists were crazy. And there was, the mole hunt was a disaster for the agency itself. So he was not highly regarded. And I think that speaks to, Angleton was ultimately held accountable and his illegal operations were exposed. And the CIA really had to be accountable in a new way for the first time. And the modern system of controlling the CIA with congressional oversight committees and the FISA courts,
Mhm.
all of that came into being because of the abuses of Jim Angleton. Not only him, but he epitomized what had gone wrong at the CIA. So now the CIA has recovered and is actually a stronger organization because of that oversight, and maybe are freer to, do more bad things around the world. But Angleton did change the way the CIA is controlled and the way it's thought of. And it wasn't a positive thing, it was a negative thing. So
Yeah.
that's another way in which he's an ambiguous character. Influential, yes. Admirable, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's kind of like maybe MacArthur becoming disgraced, saying we're going to drop nukes on Korea and publicly kind of embarrassing Truman, or Patton slapping the soldier, right? It kind of sounds, yeah, he's like, Angleton sounds like a race car, yeah, like a NASCAR race, and he goes 0 to 1,000 miles an hour, and it looks great for the first quarter of the track, but then the world turns and Angleton keeps going straight, and he hits a wall, and he pulls a Dale Earnhardt, right? It's yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and Richard Helms, the CIA director who kept Angleton in his position in retirement, conceded that he probably should have gotten him to retire a few years before he did. I mean,
yeah,
Helms kind of regretted that at the end. So,
yeah.
which is a plug for my next book, Tommy, coming out next year, Watergate and the CIA. And it's a terrific read. I mean, it's not done yet, but it's going to be a terrific read and a lot of fun, and you will definitely enjoy it. So you have to have me on the show
I
again.
will absolutely. You don't have a say in the matter. I will absolutely have you. I was gonna ask you about that towards the end, but okay, yeah, no, I'm so, dude, I legitimately love your books, dude. It's sir, I love your books. Um, it's I still got you for 12 minutes. So is now again, maybe it's I'm listening. I've listened to it so many times. I mean, it really, for everyone listening to this podcast that that does kind of know which books I sort of glow about. Raven Rock, this book, Operation Paperclip. There are a handful of books, Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. There's a handful of books that I talk about like every other episode. We're 420 something episodes in. So for everybody listening, there are a lot of books I like, but this is one of the ones I hold up in the pantheon. So just take that for what it's worth. That being said, we kind of see these parallels again, maybe between going to win Scott's widow and going to the house of Meyer. Are there parallels or are they just similar and it's just a coincidence with MK Ultra, with I can't remember his name, chaining that guy to the bed, and they gave him LSD. He was stuck in what we now call a black site for several years, and they talk. He goes, "Can we train?" And then, "Can we train? I think a Cuban. Can we hypnotize someone to go kill Castro?" Angleton, he doesn't, kind of like what Eisenhower said about, a general will use every weapon he has.
Right.
Angleton doesn't. Again, he doesn't care if you're gay or straight. He doesn't care if you're an ex-Nazi. He doesn't care if you're in the Vatican. He doesn't. He's like, hey, can we hypnotize him to kill Castro? He doesn't care how goofy that sounds. I don't. What is it called? Acid? Give it to him. Let's see if we can kill him. Like Angleton, it's again. I love and I respect and I fear the kind of just no holds barred.
Well, he was a free thinker,
Yeah.
and he was unencumbered by morality. So he would try anything to achieve his means. His role in MK Ultra was something that I talk about in the book to the extent that it's known. Unfortunately, the real records of MK Ultra were destroyed by CIA Director Helms in 1973. And so we've never really gotten the full picture of what happened. We did get some financial records later, so we can reconstruct the organizations that were involved, and that can lead to some of the people, but we don't know. We only have a patchwork knowledge of the experiments, and on that's what they were funding all this experiment in different ways to control the mind: hypnosis, LSD, all sorts of chemicals, all sorts of different techniques. So while they were doing that, then at the same time, the CIA would put these requests in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hold on, honey.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. I should have brought a glass of water.
I just tried to hand you a water bottle. I'm an
idiot. Yeah, give your hand that over here,
Mr. Moore. Yeah.
So, I had that anecdote about he had gone and said, could we train? But he might have done that, a dozen times. He might have done that 50 times, and we just don't know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's feel free to go grab some water if you want. I can monologue. Yeah. So, well, yeah, you can go get some water. Yeah. Yeah. So, So what I'm talking about is it's the MK Ultra program, which was where the CIA wanted to give psychedelics to individuals to maybe either erase their memory, or it's hypothesized that it was to provide so much trauma that it would people would dissociate into almost an alternative personality. And again, most of the files were destroyed by the CIA accidentally, but the idea was, could you create a Manchurian candidate? Could you create someone, because the perfect asset is someone that doesn't know they're an asset, and that's the whole MK Ultra thing. So, but it's tying that in, and then with ZR rifle, right? And there's the Wave Station in Miami, I think, which Dr. Vince Houghton talks about in his book, Nuking the Moon. There are these parallels between, the guys at dinner, and they're like, would you kill him? Do you think we could kill him? And they realize they're talking about Castro. And it's like, that's just what like Angleton was just talking about during his lunch break, was like just assassinating, a head of state. But again, it's my mind drawing lines and comparisons between things that don't, deserve to be compared, but let's do it anyway. Let's just speculate wildly because it was 60 years ago. Who cares? With MK Ultra, with the acid, with Myers, with Win Scott, with her diary, with Timothy Leary, with it's all these parallels. And then we look at ZR rifle, and we look at who else but Lee Harvey Oswald. We see all these things where it's, did Angleton have a hand in it, or was the fingerprint, was he so good at what he did that we don't know? It's like what I think you said at the end, when they asked him. I asked him in such RFK said he asked someone in the CIA, and I asked someone in the CIA in such a way that they couldn't lie to me, and he said, no, we didn't kill him. And years later, someone said, oh, what a perfect guy to have answer that question. Basically meaning, this guy from the CIA said we didn't kill him because he wasn't read in on it. And it's,
right.
I mean, it melts your brain.
Well, I mean, this goes to, I think, one of the larger historical, points that I feel in the book. And both of actually all three of my CIA books are really about this theme, about the CIA's rise to power from 1947 to the middle of the 1970s, when it really became the powerful institution it was. And in that rise, the assassination of Kennedy was key, because if the CIA was not held accountable for that,
Mhm.
they could not be held accountable.
Yeah.
And after Kennedy's assassination, the CIA's grip on power in the scheme of things in Washington, especially among the national security agencies, was very secure. And so uh, you had this very powerful agency, which really, to my mind, really spins out of control in Vietnam and Watergate. And people, this powerful agency became truly abusive, both nationally and internationally, at home and abroad. And people, the Watergate scandals of the 1970s were really a popular rebellion against this federal government. And people just said, we don't want to do it that way anymore. Now, that didn't curb the CIA that much, but it did definitely change them. It did curb how they operated and the way they functioned. So, you know, um, but the CIA is one faction among many in Washington, a very
Yeah.
powerful faction, and the national security factions are very powerful. We've got a budget of $600 billion, $700 billion. The intelligence budget is probably about 50 to 75 billion of that. So not a huge sector of the government compared to Social Security
Sure.
and other stuff, but significant, and especially when you consider the brain power,
Mm-hmm.
that those institutions have at their command, the information capacity that they have at their command. It's pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So my books are to try and really explain the reality of that without I don't it's from a critical distance. I'm not a cheerleader. I'm not pro
Mm-hmm.
CIA. I'm not an advocate. I'm not trying to abolish the CIA. People can decide what they want, but
Mm-hmm.
a very powerful, unaccountable institution. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm writing about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just I meant to say this earlier for everybody listening. All things spoken about are my thoughts and my opinions, and don't reflect those of Mr. Morley, because you are a very good you do look at it from a distance. Everything I'm saying, I think the first time I came on here saying I was like, oh, they're evil, and now I'm like, oh, they can do anything. This isn't a reflection of this. His book is a set of facts. I am putting my own spin on it. So full disclosure, it is a very good balanced book. So I gotta ask real quick. So you said your 3 books. Does that include the new one coming out?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think of them as
Okay.
my 3 CIA books. So
Okay. Well, because I was wondering, I was like, what do you mean your 3rd book? I only know of 2. I was like, oh, you're holding one out on me, man.
no, I've got to go. Actually, that's what I'm going to go do now is to go work on it. I'm on a tight deadline because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's got to be published by next June, which is the 50th anniversary of the Watergate break-in. So
Awesome.
I'm on a
Well,
tight deadline.
sure. Well, then, yeah. Well, hey, I'll give you a couple extra minutes. How about we wrap this one up? What I did want to say was, man, if there's just one that's completely separate from all the spy in the skullduggery and the assassinations and the affairs and all that stuff, if there is just one little glimpse of like humor in the whole book, it's the fact that Angleton and it's I forget his first name. It's something White. Angleton and this guy drink LSD laced gin intentionally.
Right.
They call a cab. They go to Chinatown in New York. They order meals. They never take a bite, and they sit there laughing hysterically. And there's something in my mind that, man, if there was ever proof that like we're living in a simulation, is the fact that the head of CIA counterintelligence, Spy Master James Jesus Angleton, was tripping balls with his friend in Chinatown, just pupils the size of quarters on LSD. And man, there's something beautiful about that. Maybe he killed JFK, I don't know, but there's something beautiful about,
Well,
man.
he he was a very creative,
Yeah.
free-spirited,
Oh
free-thinking
yeah.
man. I mean, not always admirable to be sure, but very interesting. And he wanted to explore his
Yeah.
mind to the limit. So it wouldn't surprise me that he would do acid.
Absolutely. Yeah. The orchids, the rock tumbler, and making his own jewelry. And very last thing. So everybody listening, just Google James Jesus Angleton. You have to look at pictures of this guy. He truly looks exactly like what you think he would look like. And your description is perfect when he talks about the secondhand account of Angleton coming in from a night of fishing. And to me, it's just like that's how the movie would start about Angleton. Is he comes in at night, trench coat, hat, covered in rain, and it's just like, dude, this guy looks like a CIA chief. I real quick, is there any way that this can become a movie? Maybe I'm just fanboying, but I love this book so much. I would watch that movie.
You know, I've had some expressions of interest.
Okay.
You know, I think it'd be a great movie. I
I
think
think it
it'd be
would be a
great.
fantastic movie. Well,
Um,
as this podcast grows, maybe I'll meet some director and I'll throw him your way. It would be awesome. I would watch that 10 out of 10 times. Mr. Morley, I will let you go, sir. Thank you so much for your time. I cannot say it enough. I know I recommend a lot of books. If there are 3 books I would buy from all the books I've recommended, it's Ghost about James Jesus Angleton, Raven Rock, or Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. Out of 424 episodes, those are my 3 favorite books. I'm not bullshitting you. It's an awesome book. It will terrify you. It will inspire you. At the very least, it will let you know that reality is stranger than fiction. Mr. Morley, thank you so much, sir. And I will put that book in the description, sticking to the top comment, as well as Our Man in Mexico, story about Win Scott. Go get them. They're awesome. I can't say it enough. And now I'm running in circles. So, Mr. Morley,
Thanks for having me, Tommy.
yes,
Really
sir.
appreciate it. Let's do it again.
Absolutely, my man. Anytime you want. God bless. Take care.